Hello everybody, I hope you're doing brilliantly. So today I'm going to be talking about question 3 on language paper 1 for AQA. A lot of people with this question struggle, and I think the reason for that is because we often struggle to find the distinction between language and structure. So they often end up talking about language techniques on the structure question, which of course is not going to get any marks. So today I'm actually going to go through all of the structure techniques, or not all of them, but quite a few of the structure techniques that you can use for question 3. So you will always have the same question on question 3. It will always tell you to look at the whole source, and it will say, how has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? And most people come into the exam thinking, oh, I'm going to talk about focus shift. Amazing. That's fine. It's absolutely fine. But then they're a bit stuck and they're like, well, what do I do now because I've done focus shift? Now, any of the things on this list you can talk about. Only thing that I would say is that Freytag's pyramid is very similar to focus shift, so be careful of that. We'll go through that in a minute. But you can also talk about tone shift, you can talk about first person or third person, you can talk about tenses, quite hard to do, but still possible. You can talk about stream of consciousness, which is basically just thought processes. You can talk about sentence structure, you can talk about sentence moods, which we'll go through in another video. You can talk about pacing, repetition, cyclical structure, or foreshadowing, and I will go through these in another video. But for the sake of this video and the writing part of this video, you can use any of these things, and these will all inform your analysis. So I've given you some sentence starters to kind of start you off. These are the foundations, so you can, of course, deviate from this. But if you're struggling, this is a good place to start. So we've got our point. The writer uses a structure device, 2, and then whatever the effect will be. Evidence is your quote, because if you don't quote it, it didn't happen. Explain, so this produces the effect of, and then whatever the effect is on you. And then zoom in and implication, so this effect is further produced with the structural device of. Make sure it's a structure device, of course, and all this does really is just backs up your point further, so you can create an argument. In the description I've put a link to an extract from Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. It's the same extract that we were looking at in the question 2 video, but for the question 2 video it was a lot easier to put it on the PowerPoint because we only had a set number of lines to look at. This is a little bit more difficult, so I'm not going to put it on the PowerPoint. I'm going to let you look at it and sort of make judgments for yourself. This is where I'm going to explain Freytag's pyramid to you. So our exposition here is describing appearances of setting, which is typical of expositions, and we are allowing the reader to feel as though they are there with the character. So this is setting up our setting. We're describing appearances of people as well. Right near the end we have about Georgiana, we have about Eliza, all that kind of thing. Rising action, we have a suspicion of the supernatural. Climax is where the narrator sees herself in the reflection and is frightened by it. Falling action, she realises she can't really do anything about it, because she's locked in her room, she can't escape it. So she does conclude by pondering her situation. She returns to her stool and she starts pondering her situation. It's the resolution because there's nothing she can do. But we do also have other examples. So, for example, here we have the red room was a square chamber, very seldom slept in. And I think it's interesting that this is in past tense because it reminds us that she was in her childhood at the time and was very likely to have a kind of hyperactive imagination. And we also have here about a dependent clause that adds extra information. It's information that amplifies the kind of creepiness of the room, and it kind of interests us because it amplifies the creepiness, Here we have, and in those last words lies the secret of the red room, dash, the spell which kept it so lonely in spite of its grandeur. So the dash places emphasis on the words, the spell, which highlights the eerie nature. So I don't know if you've ever done poetry, a lot of you probably do the poetry clusters, but this is a very similar thing to caesura. If you are putting a piece of punctuation in the middle of a line, it usually emphasises what's after it, sometimes what's before it as well. It says, this paragraph is the shortest in the whole extract, which is no coincidence, because it's talking about the death of Mr. Reed, and the shortness of the paragraph mimics the way his life's been cut short. That's the kind of level analysis that would be sort of when you're reaching above grade 6. It is also quite a weak link, I won't lie, but it's still a link, and I think you would still definitely get marks for it. We also see our first variation of sentence mood here. So exclamative sentence, alas, that's all it is. It just has an exclamation mark on the end. And then we also have first person limited narrative. And the reason I've highlighted this is because it allows us to see what she saw as a child, and it allows it to feel more personal. So it really does feel like we're there with her. This one's interesting. I mentioned this earlier. I returned to my stall. It's just one simple short sentence in amongst a lot of longer, complex ones, so it does make it stand out. So this hopelessness and inescapability is definitely apparent. This one is a bit of a death by PowerPoint slide, but there is a lot to say. So we've got all John Reed's violent tyrannies, all his sister's proud indifference, all his mother's aversion, all the servants' partiality, turned up in my disturbed mind like a dark deposit in a turbid well. Why was I always suffering, always browbeaten, always accused, forever condemned? Why could I never please? Why was it useless to try to win anyone's favour? Eliza, who was headstrong and selfish, was respected. So what we've got here, of course, is anaphora, because we're starting clauses with the same word all the time. Got all, so much, which is, of course, used for emphasis. We've also got repetition of always, and this is hyperbole, so it's exaggerating. So her mind is really childlike, pretty much, because she is probably feeling personally victimized, but you know, she's seeing things still through a child's eyes. We also have something called a PEEZI. So this succession of questions or interrogatives is called a PEEZI, and here it's kind of giving us that tone of uncertainty. Lastly, we have parallelism. So parallelism is just, you know, this is taken straight off Google. The use of successive verbal constructions in poetry or prose, so this is prose, which correspond in grammatical structure. This one is grammatical structure, sound, meter, meaning, etc. So this one specifically reinforces the idea that this is a bit of a spiral, the suffering is ongoing. We've got naughty and tiresome, sullen and sneaking, from morning to noon, and from noon to night. So that is successive verbal constructions that, you know, corresponding grammatical structure. But all of this is useless if we don't look at the mark scheme. So the mark scheme is very important. We're going to look at level 1 first. So level 1 offers simple comment on the effective structure. You know, the comment's there, there's an attempt, but it's not necessarily too detailed, and we haven't got too much of a suggestion on why there is an effect. Level 2 attempts to comment on the effect of structural features. So it's an attempt. It's not too contextualized, it's not too specific, it's just something that, you know, a lot of people might say about any text. It might be like an answer that seems like it's learnt by heart, and just, you know, you're thinking you're going to go into the exam saying that. But then when we get up further into level 3 a little bit, we have explains clearly the effects of the writer's choices of structural features. So what they're doing is they're understanding that the writer has made a choice to present the text like this. They are explaining it clearly, but they are not necessarily saying what it suggests. They are saying what effect it has, but not necessarily, you know, the suggestion it has. Level 4 does all of those things, so it analyses the effects of the writer's choices. So we are still understanding that the writer has made a choice, but we are analysing the effect. All of that pink stuff, all of that pink highlight is the effect of the writer's choices. So you can see, compared to this one, how different it is and how much writer's choices and effects are important. So if I were to write about this extract, I would pick 2 paragraphs. I would choose a topic per paragraph because that's how the best way is to do it. It gets you AO1 marks, it's good for organisation, it will get you marks. So I'm going to say how the structure reinforces the eeriness of it, because we've got a lot of that. And I'm also going to say how readers feel, because they feel like they're personally there with the narrator. And here's how we're going to do this. So, easy peasy paragraphs. Again, we've got, in the passage, the writer uses a variety of structure techniques to draw a reader's attention to the sinister atmosphere of the Red Room. So that is our topic sentence. We know what we're talking about. We've introduced the paragraph. Firstly, according to Freytag's pyramid, the text opens with descriptions of setting that are typical of expositions. The Red Room was a square chamber, very seldom slept in, I might say never. So immediately, the dependent clause, very seldom slept in, adds additional information, introducing us to the idea that the room has been abandoned. As well as this, the punctuation reinforces the eerie nature of the room, which is shown in the quote, "The secret of the Red Room, the spell which kept it so lonely in spite of its grandeur." The dash here breaks up the sentence and, as a result, places emphasis on the phrase "the spell," which of course is associated with the sinister and the supernatural. So there you have it. That is how you would approach question 3. Structure techniques are so important to learn because they are very different from language techniques. And I will do an entire video on structure techniques because they do seem to be a weak point. That's fine, but I will make sure that they are, not glossed over. Thank you so much for watching. If you think anything in this video was missing, definitely put it in the comments, and I will see you next time.